I am truly, truly honored to be here at this very special, prestigious school, the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Relations. Coming to Princeton was not part of my agenda, but on my agenda, nothing is part of the agenda because it's a huge agenda and everything is on the agenda. So today I am here with you. What I'm going to talk about is over 25 years of walking the campaign trail. As you can see from my CV, I am not a professor. I know nothing about research. I have no theory, I have no policy to share with you. But I do have 25 years of walking the campaign trail. And what I am in charge of in my party, the only opposition party in Cambodia, the Cambodian National Rescue Party, from now on I will say CNRP, so it's not so long, or the Rescue Party. I am in charge of the Public and International Relations Department of the opposition party. So you would say, wow, what kind of credential does she have? What kind of theory does she have? Have she published any study report? I have zero of that. But I do have 2 legs. I do walk. I do believe in the reality of things. The 25 years have been 25 years of putting democracy seeds in each and every single field in Cambodia. So I will be sharing that with you. And I will go from the real issue to personal issues to sometimes scratching my head and say, how did I do that? How did I get here? Yeah? So, and I hope that it's a conversation rather than rushing through and then, okay, that's done. I do hope that at the end of this conversation, you take action. Because it's not my agenda alone. It's a global agenda. And I put it in the context of human rights, freedom, liberties, and democracy. How many of you can say, oh, I'm not going to get on this agenda? You sign on to this, right? Hopefully. It's our world. Okay, let's get on to it. It all started in the hot afternoon in June of 1972. I just graduated from high school. And my parents put me and my sister onto a plane for Paris to get our education, higher education, because the war in Cambodia has spread. The war in Vietnam has spread all over in Cambodia, all over. As you may know, from 1975 to 1979, the war in Vietnam spread to Cambodia, and America lost the war. The communists took over in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, the Red Khmers. And the Red Khmers are Cambodians, are Khmers. Khmer means Cambodian. They're Rouge, they're red, they're communists, hardcore communists. They took over 2 million lives. Children, the elderly, you name it. My parents disappeared sometime around that time, and I had not heard of my parents, had not seen my parents, although they are among the 2 million lives who were lost in the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge. But when you have not seen the actual, you have no evidence of the death. There is no closure. There's no closure. They died in the maybe extrajudicial killings of the Khmer Rouge, starvation, who knows, but there's no closure. And because there is no closure, that I had to go back to Cambodia. I went to Cambodia 18 years later, after I had studied in the United States. I had gone to the refugee camps to work with the refugees. And in 1991, the Cambodian political parties that were in conflict finally decided that the war should be over and signed the Paris Peace Accord in 1991. So the Paris Peace Accord, I will come back to it, because it's very important in the history as well as today, the international relations that we use, and we use the Paris Peace Accord as a document, a vital document, because over 18 countries signed, big countries in the world, signed up to the Paris Peace Accord. And in the Paris Peace Accord, there's a very important part of chapter 25 that talks about the obligations of the signatories. The obligations include the promotion, the protection of human rights, democracy, and free and fair and genuine elections. So the Paris Peace Accord allowed us to go home. I went home 18 years later, no longer an 18-year-old young person, but a mother of 2 children. I went in and then started an NGO that worked with women. And this is where I started to think about, who am I? 18 years away, and now back into a country that is totally torn apart by war. Am I part of this country or not? But then I remember that why did I come back home? Because there was no closure, and I had to come back home. I was not going to come back home and sit and raise my children. I wanted to come back home and be a part of nation building. And I had to focus, because nation building is huge. You'd be lost if you do not focus. So the word to me is focus, focus, focus. Why did you come home? And choose a few battles that I want to fight with. And I wanted to be with the women of Cambodia. If you were to rebuild a nation, you have to rebuild with the women and the children and the disenfranchised, those who do not have a voice. So I started this first NGO called Camera, or Cambodian Women, and we had a credit program. It was for the urban poor. It was then that I walked from it is an urban area. I walked and walked and walked. And I learned Cambodian again, because I was educated in French. I learned to read and write again. And had no idea about wanting to go into politics, because my father told me, you can choose anything, you can do anything you want, but don't go into politics, because it's a dirty business. Guess where I am? Then in 1998, in 1995, I went to the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing, History for Women. How many of you know the Beijing conference? Oh, not bad, women, men. And I heard at the time the First Lady of the United States talk about the power of women. If you want to change, you have to be in politics and you have to have the power to change. And I got inspired by that. I came home in 1990. I went back in 1995. I mobilized women throughout Cambodia, over 1,000 women from the hills of Cambodia and all that. And then we wove something called the piece of cloth, women weaving the world together, and we used it to express the issues of women in Cambodia. And I was then I was called to the office of the Prime Minister at the time and asked if I would join his party and if I would want to run for election. I said, yes, of course, because I want to have the power to change the real life of the women. And then I became the women minister. I was the first woman to run this women's ministry because before that they could not find a woman to run the ministry. The first week I got in, I said, we have to change a Cambodian proverb that says, men are gold, women are just a white piece of cloth. Imagine that. This is the symbol that we created. Men can be gold, but women are precious gems. This is when I put together my 18 years raised in Cambodia, so I had the roots of Cambodian roots, right? So I know all these proverbs. And then I have the power. But that is more or less the Western side of me that caught me to go for it. If you were a Cambodian woman, you would just be a white piece of cloth. But I had to say, what is it in my culture that can be combined and give women that this place at home, but as well as the power to lead. So we changed the proverb to say, and then the symbol is, women are precious gems. And we will call the precious gems after that. The women in Cambodia became the precious gems. And that symbol is still the symbol of the women's ministry in Cambodia today. So lesson number one. Lesson number one was to always find the balance. Cultural balance, values, and the values. How do you keep that balance? And not break the culture and engage people in the change. Otherwise, it would not be sustainable. That's lesson number one. Concretely, what did we do? Concretely, we mobilized women around Cambodia to support the women's ministry, draft the bill on domestic violence bill, the anti-domestic violence bill. And we changed a concept in Cambodia, the family concept. In Cambodia, the family is not just the parents and the children. Because of the war, the roof that you live under is a roof to protect more than the father, the mother, and the children. It protects also the orphans who came out of the war and try to find shelter, try to find a roof. So the family was really an extended group of people without sometimes any relations at all. But they lived together. And if we were to just keep the concept of family as in the vocabulary, then if we were to protect, if we had a law, an domestic violence law, that if it is a family, then what about the orphans who came to live with that family? Would this law protect the orphans? Would the elderly who, when they lost everybody, they just found somebody, a family, and walked into that home and lived with that family? Would that law protect that elderly person too? What about the domestic workers? Would that law protect their family, the domestic workers too. So we made it so that the concept of family becomes anybody living under the same roof. Again, we broke the culture, we broke the traditions. But so lesson number 2, fight for justice. Justice, justice, justice. I have no theory whatsoever, but I believe that rebuilding the nation is rebuilding the nation based on some strong principles. And those principles are covered in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Respect human rights, protect human rights. Then I decided that I was no longer going to work with a government that is so corrupt, full of corruption. I left the government. I joined the opposition 5 years later. I joined the opposition party the day that the leader of the workers' movement was assassinated. By then, as a women's minister, I was also very, very involved in fighting for the voices for the workers in the factories. And then I always was involved. I was the only minister in government that would go to the workers, the strike. And then the prime minister would call me and say, "Get out of there. You're with the government. Why are you with the workers who are on strike?" Well, workers are on strike. The government officials should be there instead of killing them. So I walked out that day when the blood of Chirichir, very well known, in 2004, was still on the mat. I called the opposition leader and said, "I am joining the opposition." That was a big deal. I was the only minister, the cabinet member, who joined the opposition. The prime minister didn't like me after I left. And he said, and I was walking, this is my second campaign trail, by the way, the second campaign for the second election. We won again, as opposition. We won, I won my seat. We win because as opposition, we are always with the people about land issues, about deforestation, about anything, we are with the people. And the prime minister did not like it. And he called me by a very bad name. And I took him to court. I took the prime minister to court. This is the American side of me. But the women in Cambodia said, "That's not the American side of you. That is what we want too. We want justice. But we don't know how to break out of this cultural, traditional role. You show us how to." The trial went on and on and on, and every single time I had to go to court, I would go to court with a candle. The candle for justice, but because it was the symbol of our party. And I I challenged every single policeman, I challenged the judges, I challenged the prime minister to take me to court. Because in the whole process, I wanted to take the judiciary, the judicial system of Cambodia to court. You know what they did to my lawyer? They threatened my lawyer to drop my case. And of course, he dropped the case. Or they were going to disbar him. And they made him join the ruling party. He came to me, called me and said, "Your Excellency," in tears, "either I continue my career as a lawyer or I go to jail with you. What do you want me to do? I have children. My life is in danger. So I went to jail. I went to court by myself without representation at all. This is when I learned again. The word due process, justice, justice, justice again. If they can do it to me, imagine a poor woman. Imagine someone without any money, without any power at all. And they do it all the time because the judiciary in Cambodia is in the hands of the prime minister. Yeah? I went to court, I lost, but the women mobilized among themselves and paid for the fine. That was about $5,000. Every single penny that they had, they collected and paid for my fine. And these are moments when you have to say to yourself, why are you a politician? How can you face the people and not perform according to the expectation of the people? This is another lesson I learned as a politician is, can I go to bed, wake up in the morning and say, I have done something for my people? If I can say yes, then I continue for the next day. If I say no, then I should quit. And every day I say yes. Because that journey is such a long journey. But I'm going to cut it short. This is the opposition. When we marched in 2013, we won the election, but the power was not transferred to us. And then we mobilized hundreds and thousands of people, the voters, who demanded recount, and demanded change. Pro. We worked, we protested for over about half a year. We could have taken the whole country. We could have toppled the government, but we believed truly in establishing the electoral process that is free and fair. And we truly believe in nonviolence, and we truly believe in the democratic process. Because if we are to overthrow the government can overthrow us, can take over the power, then take the power away from us. Because all the army is in the hands of Hun Sen anyway. Again, the government decided to crack down on us and close this area that was called Freedom Park. I said, no, you can't close Freedom Park because Freedom Park, it belongs to the people. It says so in the law. So I led the people to Freedom Park for 3 months. Every day we would be there. And the army, see the army. This is no joke. 3 months later, the members of parliament and our youth members, others, were arrested, sent to jail. I was in jail, we were in jail as parliamentarians, we were in jail for a week, but the rest of our colleagues stayed and were sentenced to 20 years. 20 years for what? 20 years for fighting for freedom, to keep Freedom Park alive. It was worth 20 years. But I felt, until today, I feel the guilt every day. But we have to move on. Move on to today. Today, democracy is dead in Cambodia. Because Hun Sen knows, Hun Sen is a Khmer Rouge, a former Khmer Rouge. He's been in power for over 30 years. He knows that if he allows us, the opposition party, to continue to grow, he will lose the 2018 election last July. Yeah? So within three weeks, He closed down over 20 radio stations. He put human rights defenders in jail. He dissolved the opposition party. This is the party leader who is in house arrest today, over a year now. And he dissolved the CNRP. We are considered rebels because we are supposed to be conspiring with the US government to topple Mr. Hun Sen. So every day we are called the rebels. We are labeled as, so this is a campaign to free Mr. Kem Sokha. We continue to walk the campaign trail, but we walk outside where we can't be in Cambodia. In Cambodia, every move you make, the village chief will know. The police will know. They take pictures. They know what you're talking about. It is still Khmer Rouge style. Hardcore communists inside Cambodia today. Although there is a facade, you say, come on, Sochua, you're lying. We can still go to Angkor Wat. Look, you Google Cambodia, it's a beautiful place. But it's a beautiful place for those who do not want to speak up, who only want to enjoy life in Cambodia. Not a beautiful place for the people who want to fight and put democracy back into on track. So today, I am in exile. 118 of our colleagues are also either in exile inside Cambodia, in Thailand, looking for asylum. Why? Because Hun Sen does not want us inside Cambodia, because he knows that the people who are with us, we have over 44% of the seats we had until they dissolved us, representing over 3 million people. Yeah? They are waiting for us inside Cambodia. So Hun Sen will do everything possible to stop us from going back home. But we are doing everything possible to go back home. How? Now, this is the how. We are very active at the EU in Brussels. We mean the people outside of Cambodia, Cambodians outside of Cambodia, so the diaspora. We are lucky to have a very, very political diaspora. In the United States, for example. We work with Congress here to have 2 measures taken. One is we have targeted sanctions against the high-ranking officials in the government of Cambodia for visa sanctions, and another sanction, which is the freezing of assets of the high-ranking officials in the government of Cambodia. And we don't recognize the government of Cambodia, by the way. We call the regime of Mr. Hun Sen. And these, again, in the international relations, these words are really important. If, for example, I slip and I say the government of Cambodia, the EU will say, oh, you recognize there is a government in Cambodia. No, there's no government in Cambodia. We demand a real government. We demand re-election. So when I go to the EU, we come here, we go to Canada, we go to Australia, we go everywhere. Our demands are as follows. Free and fair elections, re-elections. In order to have re-elections, you have to free our leader, Mr. Kem Sokha, who is in jail, who is in house arrest, under house arrest, right? We have to go back home. You have to put back the CNRP. And we want 5,000 seats at the local level. They all have to be able to practice to gain their seats back. We cannot talk about politics. If we were inside, you can't talk. You're outside, you talk, they follow you. This is again, is about how far they can push you and how far you can push them. And how do we push them, Mr. Hun Sen? We use the international community. Remember I said the Paris Peace Accord? Then we go back to all these 18 countries. For example, you're France. Your obligation, France. Canada, your obligation, Canada. Remember? Even China, who wants to be China here? Your obligation, remember? See, the friendly countries, fine. But we are working on the friendly countries and say, you are friendly countries, you believe in human rights and democracy, do something about it. And finally, the EU, as of last Friday, said to Mr. Hun Sen, you know what? The privileges that Cambodia has been able to enjoy by using this EU initiative called Everything But Arms, EBA. How many of you know EBA? Everything But Arms? Hopefully you know. Everything that is produced in Cambodia but arms can be sold in the EU market. Take a look at the shirts or pants or shoes that you are wearing. Where is it made? Can you take a look at your t-shirt? Where is it made? This t-shirt. Where is it made? Can you look, please, look at the label. Where is it made? And tell me. Huh? Vietnam. China. Philippines. Where else? Indonesia. Anywhere from America? No. Why? Europe? No. Why? Because in these countries, the workers make less than $1 a day. Or made in the past. They had to struggle, they had to lose lives. Now, the wages in Cambodia, I'm talking about Cambodia, is $182 a month, 6 days a week, and 8 hours a day. If you want to get to 200, then you have to work extra time. So, EBA, why? Everything But Arms in Cambodia, because Cambodia is one of the least developed countries in the world, right? So we have the privilege to use the market in Europe. And yes, the factories that are in Cambodia making all your garments and shoes and all that you're wearing, they are investing in Cambodia. Chinese companies, South Korean, Japanese, because of cheap labor. These factories are not owned by Cambodians. They're owned by the big companies, the big brands. H&M. How many of you shop at H&M? Don't feel guilty. I'm not going to lay guilt on you. But remember, the market from EU that they use it because they can use their cheap labor in Cambodia. Now Europe is saying, the EU, Brussels is saying to Cambodia, to Mr. Hun Sen last Friday, nope, no more EBA. Because the conditions to enjoy the market in Europe is that everything that is made in Cambodia is made with respect of human rights, protection of human rights, labor rights, good conditions for our workers. And in the past 10 years, the EU has been telling Mr. Hun Sen that the sugar that is made in Cambodia is made from the plantations that are actually on the land of farmers that were kicked out. Thousands of them. Hundreds and thousands of hectares of this land now are given to these big companies as economic land concessions. And they're producing, making the sugar, whatever, and sell it at the EU market. EU is saying no, no more. And EU didn't say no, EU took almost 10 years. And we had, for the past 10 years, we have been saying to EU, meaning we make a lot of trips, we go everywhere. If you want to represent your country, you want to fight for justice, you have to go to the highest level. And you don't go to the highest level, if you go to the highest level, you have to go with the true story of the people. That's how you win. That's why I go back to walk the campaign trail. And I will look at any government officials and say, you don't believe me that their land is taken? You don't believe me? How can you say you don't believe me? But if you go and you ask for a favor, those big officials will say, no, we're not going to give it to you. But if you defend the principles, you go back to what they are supposed to be representing, that's how you fight for it. And you win. A small country like Cambodia, you know the opposition, public relations and international relations, you know how many we are? 4 people. 4. Okay, that's how we're dealing with EU. How do we deal with the US? Okay, China. How do we deal with China? We deal with China through China has a initiative called Belt and Road. How many of you know Belt and Road, the BRI? Yeah. You want to explain? Who wants to explain Belt and Road? Try. Who knows and want to explain? What is Belt and Road, BRI? Belt is actually, the whole thing is an initiative by Xi Jinping to connect China to the world. And when China says connection, China means invasion, control, monopoly of the full global trade. So building roads, infrastructure, ports, anything that a country needs, China will build for you. But China, what does China want? China wants these roads and this belt and these ports to help China cover the whole world. And Cambodia is a small country, but geopolitically speaking, is very key for China, for South China Sea. And also Cambodia is a member of the ASEAN region. And in the ASEAN policy, you have to, every single decision or even statement has to be done through consensus. Everybody has, all the 10 nations members, everybody has to say yes. And when China wants something, China will tell Mr. Hun Sen, veto this or vote for this. And Mr. Hun Sen wants his power, so he will go with China. He is now abandoning the democratic world and go for communism, back to communism. And we're saying we can't go back to the Khmer Rouge. And that's why we fight so hard. And that's why every single day we have to say to our people, we can't leave this fight, or we go back to Khmer Rouge. This is real. We can't allow China to take over again. But at the same time, China will not disappear. China will not disappear until we, the people of Cambodia, can exercise their political rights. That's why we fight to return to Cambodia. That's what we want. And hopefully, with the pressure from EU, pressure from the United States, and hopefully other countries, Mr. Hun Sen will negotiate with us soon, get back to dialogue. In conclusion, what have I done? What have I learned for 25 years, in the past 25 years? Don't take democracy for granted. Every single policy has to be built around human rights, democracy, freedom, and liberty. At the end of the day, if the negotiation is only about trade and the big companies, we have failed our people. At the end of the day, if our people are not at the table, the big table of power, we have failed our people. And no matter how small your country is, you can't fail your people. No matter how small your country is, you must put your country on the global map. This is what I have learned. It's a long journey. Thank you.